Hello guys, this is Jan from Kroscloud and let's take a look at camera settings at this tutorial. In this menu, you can adjust the camera. Let's start with the field of view. An exact definition of field of view is kinda rocket science, so long story short, it defines the area of the world that's visible through the camera. Bigger the number is, camera has wider field of view. It means shorter focal length and creates bigger perspective distortion. If you go to smaller numbers, you will get narrower camera. It has the bigger focal length and smaller perspective distortion. With a minimum value of 1 degree, you have almost orthographic camera. It means camera without a distortion. Such a camera doesn't look very natural, but provides kind of technical view where you can see the model's dimensions without perspective distortion, like with a technical drawing. Let's go back to something natural, like 80 degrees, let's say, in this case. Constraints. Kroscloud allows even with free account to add limits for camera movements, to restrict user to move to unwanted positions. The constraints work in a way that each constraint set a stop to the current camera position. At first, let's turn off current constraints. Okay, for example, if we want to set minimum and maximum distance, let's move the camera to the desired minimum distance position like this and click on minimum. You can see it's green now, and the constraint has been set to the current camera position. Let's move to maximum distance, like this for example, and again click on the maximum constraint. Now, when you dolly the camera in and out, you can see that we are limited by the selected boundaries, effectively limiting user to go too close or inside our main object or kind of fly away from it. What to do if we want to change one of the constraints? For example, if we want to change minimum constraints, at first you need to turn the current one off and then select the new minimum position. Let's define it here for now. Easy. Let's go to polar constraints. Polar constraints limit the camera movement in the kinda up and down sense. You can use these constraints to limit the camera from going kinda under your model, for example. It is useful for buildings or panoramic images that doesn't have upper part, like panel images from drones. So let's define the button polar constraints at this position. Now, when we are moving up and down, you can see that user can't move under this position. Azimuth constraints. Azimuth constraints limit the camera in the horizontal direction. So you can set left and right constraint to allow only this particular angle, for example. Keep in mind that for azimuth constraints, you have to set both of them to work correctly. Set only one doesn't make sense. But let's turn them off for now. Double side rendering. If the camera has only one side rendering, it means when the checkbox is unchecked, faces of the 3D model that are facing outwards the camera are not visible. Let's try. But it's a good idea to disable the button polar constraint first. You see? And let's enable it again. You can clearly see the difference. For this type of scene, it's definitely better to choose the double side rendering, but let's jump to another scene. Let's take a look at this example. In this 3D scene, you can see the boot on kind of a ground with pre-generated shadow, with a single side camera. If you move the camera down the ground is not visible now, because its faces are facing outwards the camera, which is definitely desirable behavior as we want to see the boot's sole, not the ground. As we would if we choose the double side rendering. In this case, when we move under the ground, we can still see it, and it's definitely not what we want, right? Disable camera panning. With this option, you can, surprisingly, disable camera panning. To pan the camera means to move its center by a right mouse button or double finger touch. It's not the same thing as rotating the camera. Let's take a look. This means to pan. I'm holding a right mouse button and moving center of the camera. If you press left mouse button, you rotate the camera. And that's it for the options of the camera settings. When you finish, you can save the camera settings. But before saving, don't forget to set camera to default position, as by saving you also set camera's default position. It means the position where camera appear when model is loaded. But you can also leave this dialog without saving. This is useful if you want to keep your changes to the camera, for example to generate a new thumbnail with this setting. But you don't want to save it and use it for public viewer. That's it. Thanks for your time. If you have any question, write down a comment or shoot us a message at our contact page. And thanks for your time. Stay tuned.